unlike pride and rhetoric, my story tonight will be presented a little more humbly. In fact, I have decided to speak my words here, in your backstage area. Does that ring out there? That audience? That isn't mine. The audience that I care to speak to here and now are the men and women of the FAM roster who have been personally affected by my actions over the years. Just like my former students. In order for this to make sense, I need to take you back to my beginning. Before there was forever a movement, before there were 7 deadly sins, before I became the man that I am today. Throughout my life, I've gone by many names, but the one you'll likely know me as is Father. But when I was born in 1950, out of the great city of Columbus, Ohio, I was given the name Leonardo Vega. I grew up, like many of you, an ordinary boy. I had parents that loved and cared for me, a family that I could depend on, and a community that lifted each other up. Life was good. But then, things took a turn for the worse with the start of the Vietnam War. The needs of our community didn't matter anymore, as the needs of our government took over. One by one, families were torn apart, as fathers and sons alike were taken from their lives and forced to fight in something that they had nothing to do with. And as soon as I was old enough, it wasn't too long from then when my name was called for the draft. I was scared, anxious, terrified. I had no idea what I was getting into, and nothing could have prepared me for some of the things that I saw out there. I spent 4 years unwillingly fighting in this war, and every single day, I not only witnessed things that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy, but in some cases, I was the man inflicting that suffering onto others. When we stepped off that plane into foreign territory for the first time, it was as if the humanity had been taken from us. We were no longer people, not to our enemy, and especially not to our government. We were nothing more than animals being sent to die. You only had one chance of making out of that place unscathed, and that was to become the animal that you were sent there to be, no matter how much it broke you inside. After those 4 years had passed, and those of us who had survived came back home, things were never the same again. Our communities had suffered devastating and lasting consequences as a result of our involvement in this, as every single man that came back was now a burden on his family and society. And for what? What was it all for? Nothing. It was all for nothing. The only thing that was driving this wheel was the greedy intentions of the men who sat above us, and millions upon millions of lives suffered as a consequence. I was angry, confused, but the wrath that I felt within those moments is unlike anything I've ever felt before. I knew I couldn't return to the life that I belonged to prior. The animal that I had been turned into, that wasn't something that I was willing to return to my family. As far as I was concerned, the young man that left Ohio in '68 died in the battle. A new path was laid out in front of me, one in which I had to take steps down very, very carefully, because from that day forth, I made it my mission to take vengeance on the people who destroyed my life, who tarnished my community, who wrecked my country. For a number of years, I became what is commonly referred to as an anarchist, where I used the same tactics that my government told me to use against my enemy, against themselves. I'd like to be able to tell you that this was a successful venture, but instead, it's one that resulted in many nights behind bars. I was starting to lose faith. I had set myself down this path in hopes that I would be able to make a difference, that my actions would be able to change the corrupt system that was being used against everyday Americans. But the more I walked down this path, the more my life started to fall apart. I was getting to the end of my rope, and if things had continued in the way they were, it wouldn't have been long before I put myself out of my own misery. Then, out of nowhere, the most peculiar thing happened. I received a mysterious, unmarked letter, and when I opened it, you can imagine my surprise when the entire thing was written in Russian. I took a book from the local library to help translate the words, and over the course of 3 days and 3 nights, I translated the whole thing. The letter was from a small, secret faction located within the heart of the Soviet Union. They informed me that they had been watching me for a number of years, ever since I had gone to Vietnam. They felt as if our goals were mutually aligned and that we could benefit from working together. Of course, I was fully aware that our country was engaged in a cold stalemate with the Soviet Union at the time, and that they would probably want to use me in whatever way they could to help turn the tides of the wheel. And at that time in my life, I wanted the exact same thing. From there, I made my way over to the Eastern Bloc to link up with the people who had sent this letter. Upon my arrival, I found that I wasn't the only American who had been invited here. And then they told us what the secret faction was all about. Just like myself, these were people who were appalled by the actions of their government, both Americans and Russians alike. Most of these people not only wanted to see the cold stalemate brought to an end, but they also wanted to bring down the men responsible for making such situations like this a reality in an attempt to bring peace to the world. For many years, we worked together to bring as much peace to the world as possible. We traveled the globe, from country to continent, finding people in need and giving them the help that they deserved where their governments had failed them. While our ultimate mission was to bring down the United States and Russian empires, it was constantly put on the back burner as we focused on our peacekeeping missions. It was during this time that I learned that I wasn't like the other soldiers. I was different. I was stronger, faster, wiser, had more durability. At times when my comrades needed to stop for rest, I still had days, maybe even weeks left in me, ready to continue the fight. It seemed like a gift at first. Was this the reason I survived Vietnam? But over time, this gift started to present itself as a curse, as the conditions we faced as a team suddenly became conditions that only I could handle. One by one, I watched as my brothers in arms dropped off like flies, either to an early retirement or a fate much worse. After almost 25 years since I joined this group, I was one of the only men that remained, along with the people who had summoned me here in the first place. During that time, We had made small steps towards our goal of toppling the governments that had sent us down this path in life. But in reality, we were nowhere near the completion of that task. I'm proud of the work that we did over that time. Because of what we did, many people's lives are better as a result. But despite that, I just couldn't shake what I had come here to do in the first place. I wanted to get rid of the governments that had brought so much harm to the world, and I didn't plan on resting until that goal became a reality. At the beginning of 1999, I approached my superiors with an idea. If we were going to make this goal of toppling the world's largest governments a reality, then we were going to need an army of capable soldiers to live up to that task. We would need soldiers with the strength, speed, and durability like me. We decided to create a place where I could channel my skills into others in the hopes of making soldiers just like me to help fight the battle that we weren't able to do yet. While my superiors took care of building this place in the heart of Russia, I set forth to find the people that would train under me. I had met many people while traveling the world, people who I saw pure, good hearts within, people who also wanted to fight to better their situation for themselves and everyone around them. As this was going to be a trial period for the Academy, I didn't want to overdo it and diminish our chances at success. So I made the decision to keep the initial class of this Academy at a nice, manageable 7. The 7 consisted of a young boy from the slums of Brazil, a man of God from the United States, a lunatic from torn-apart Afghanistan, a mature, dominant lady from France, a poor, tortured soul from Japan, a former, ruthless convict from Russia itself, and finally, the last to join the 7 was a brave young man from Egypt who, from as young as he could remember, was fighting to protect his people. While I couldn't reveal too much to these individuals at the time, I assured them that they would be fighting for a just cause bigger than themselves. Since most of these people had already been rescued by myself firsthand, they didn't take much convincing. I returned to Russia with these 7 people behind me, where we arrived at the finished facility, and as the year 2000 began, so did our training. For 6 months straight, I did whatever I could to work these people into shape in an attempt to pass my gifts on to them. I put them through some of the most grueling and intense conditions that I could come up with, based on some of the things that I had experienced firsthand in Vietnam and beyond. Whatever respect these people once had for me was quickly being diminished, but I couldn't stop to think about that. We were here for something bigger than ourselves, and despite what they thought of me now, I was sure that one day they would thank me for it. But then, everything went wrong. After 6 months of training, each of them faced me in hand-to-hand combat, and in order for this program to be labeled a success, only one of them had to defeat me. But they couldn't. Despite facing all 7 back-to-back, they all fell to me as quickly as the last. We had failed, and while I was disappointed with the results, those above me were a lot more concerned. They felt as if these 7 people couldn't return to the world because if they did, our operation would get out, and that was something that they weren't willing to let happen. They made the decision to abandon the academy, and in the process, I would lock up the 7 individuals in the dungeons of the facility, leaving them there to die. This wasn't a decision that sat well with me. These people had come here out of their trust for me, and not only did I force them to hate me during their 6 months of training, but the promise I had made to them was about to be broken with the biggest of betrayals. The night before we had planned to abandon them, I made it my goal to get them out. I rushed around everywhere frantically to find them a means of escape, struggling to find something for everyone. Eventually, I managed to find one vehicle on the outskirts of the facility that would allow one of them to escape. So I brought the keys to the young man who was last to join the 7, telling him to escape while he still had the chance. Thankfully, he did get out. But on his way, he triggered some alarms, and when the guards arrived, all they found was me, working on a means to get the other 6 out. I was too late. I then had to use everything within me to fight my way out of the academy that I had helped create. As if I didn't, my fate would have been the same as the other 6 who remained. In the years that followed, I went into hiding. Despite this group not having the capabilities to topple world governments, they most certainly would have had the ability to track me down. All my life consisted of, from that point on, was either moments of running or moments to sit back and think, letting the guilt of what happened to the 7 people I brought to the academy consume me. I needed to move on. I needed to get these thoughts out of my head and return to some sort of normality. After 4 years on the run and learning that their track on me was getting cold, I made the decision to settle down in Mexico, becoming a trainer at a luchador wrestling school. I'll be honest, I didn't really understand it. A bunch of people hiding under masks, pretending to be something they are not. But I have to admit, this place was good for me. And on top of presenting me with a newfound love for professional wrestling, it also provided a good place for me to lay low and not have to worry about my former comrades catching up to me. For a few years there, things were going good. I was finally again at a peaceful point in my life. But then, it happened again. The same type of atrocities that I had experienced in America, in Vietnam, in Russia, and all over the world were happening right here in Mexico. And of course, once again, it was all because of the government. Once again, the people employed to protect us were causing more suffering than they were worth. All of these thoughts started to come flying back into my mind. The same thoughts that had corrupted my mind for years. And then, I started to think about the academy. How could it have failed? Everything that I put those people through were the same conditions that I went through for years. Is that not what turned me into the soldier I am? I was sure of it. I wanted another chance. With a few adjustments, I was sure that I could complete this task on my own and make it a success. Throughout my time in this luchador school, there was something that I noticed. Despite many of them not being strong enough, fast enough, and durable enough, something that each and every one of them had was heart. It was the same type of trait that I saw in that young man from Egypt. I quickly came to learn that this was a trait very common in those who took up the mantle of a professional wrestler. So that is what I searched for. I searched the world over for professional wrestlers who also had the strength, speed, and durability that I was looking for. And my search brought me to the south of Italy, where I found 4 young professional wrestlers eager to take their careers to the next level. Unlike the 7 that I had brought to the academy, these 4 didn't start out with any trust towards me. Of course, I was a stranger to them, but in order to convince them to train under me, I told them that I would do it without any cost to them, making the promise that after 6 months with me, they would be more than capable for anything they could imagine. I trained the 3 men for 6 months with a refined version of my training regime, and once again, the longer we went, the more their hatred and distrust for me grew. But I have to give it to them. At any moment, they could have walked away without a care in the world, and everything I was trying to build would be over. But the resolve those 4 men showed, it was something special. When our 6 months of training came to an end, I told the 4 men the truth. I told them who I really was, where I had come from, and why I was training them, and that all there was left to do was to have each of them face me, and if any single one of them could defeat me in hand-to-hand combat, then finally, after 8 years, this would be labeled a success. But that's not how things went down. The 4 men were furious with me and felt as if I had betrayed them. Everyone refused to face me in the final test and left my school, never to get in contact again. I was devastated. I returned into hiding, but this time, I stayed on my own. From 2008, I vowed that I would never interact with the outside world again. I vowed that my own twisted ways would never corrupt this world again, and that I would leave people in peace. But the damage had already been done. The darkness that lives inside of me had already been passed on to the 7 people who are at the academy. It had already been passed on to the 4 men that I met in Italy. And because of the actions each of them took next, that darkness continued to spread. The 7 people that I thought had been abandoned in the academy reunited with each other, built themselves back up, and went on to create a new plague on this earth known as the 7 deadly sins. The 4 men that had left Italy to travel the world after having the misfortune of meeting me all eventually returned to the place they first met and went on to create a plague of their very own known as Forever, a movement. Over the last 2 decades, these 2 entities that were created as a result of my direct involvement have done nothing but bring harm and suffering to anyone who has ever been involved with them, allowing that darkness that was born inside of me to continue growing. I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. And if that wasn't bad enough, now those 2 entities are at direct odds with one another, and I fear if level heads don't prevail, it could truly be the end of them all. That is why I have returned. That is why I have come out of my 15 years in hiding. I cannot sit back and allow my darkness to continue to spread. I will not. Pride, Rannick, you have become the faces of your respected armies. Please, if you two have listened to anything that I have to say tonight, if you two heard anything I've had to say, please, put this behind you and end it now, before this darkness consumes the rest of your waking lives.
What's wrong, Father? You look like you've seen a ghost.
I had a feeling you'd come looking this way. But please know, this doesn't concern you.
And that's exactly where you're wrong. You see, at first I wanted to destroy your greatest masterpiece in Rennick, and then take care of all the other puppets. But having you arriving at my doorstep has just made this a whole lot more interesting.
Status. I have no quarrel with you.
That's it? That's all you have to say?
No, I refuse to fight you.
You can't run from your past forever! Karma will eventually catch up!
Once again, Status. You've misread the situation.
No, old man. You misread the situation.
The biggest event in WWE Games history! The grandest stage of them all! This is what it's all about, right here! History! Legacies in the making! Anniversary 5!